Hello, I found a Wikipedia article about the Gallagher index, and it's pretty interesting because you can actually calculate how unfair your election is. So you have some election in your country, parliament, presidential, anything, and then you can calculate this number. And as you can see here, the low values under 5, that's the fair elections, and the high values are very unfair elections. So over 5 is an unfair election, and if you have like a really high number, then it's very, very unfair. And usually how you get these high numbers is because the system is not really fair to the voter. So for example, if 30% of the voters vote for a party, then maybe that party could only get 10% of the seats in the parliament. And that's very unfair, right? Because the voters, they say we want this party in the parliament, but the system is not really distributing the seats fairly. And that can happen because of different factors, but I will talk a bit about first past the post voting system later. So actually you can see here they have calculated this Gallagher index for the Canadian election. That's 12. That's very, very unfair. Shouldn't be that high in a democratic party country. And then in New Zealand you had another election, 2005. That's a very low Gallagher index. As you can see, it's pretty easy to calculate, but this is very low. Then in Australia you had an election in Queensland where 49% voted for a party. That party got 87% of the seats. So that's a big, big difference. And this big difference, it creates a very high Gallagher index number. As you can see here, there's another party that got 26% of the votes, but they got under 8% of the seats. Of course, that the people who voted for that party would feel cheated. But actually, the second party that got cheated out of votes, they will actually want to sustain the system, and I will also explain why that is later. But usually in Australia, you just have super unfair elections, as you can see here, pretty high Gallagher number, but not extremely unfair. This is extremely unfair, this is just super unfair. In Sweden, the number is low, of course, under 5%, that's super good. And this is in USA. I think the voters, I know they pretty much know they need to stay. I mean, they don't need to stay at home, but they can stay at home because the system is dysfunctional. And also they don't vote for small parties. So basically you vote for one or the other party, and both these parties will want this unfair system to sustain itself, because then they can keep the power. Because if people vote for a third party, then maybe their vote will just be lost, because these small parties, they're not getting any seats. It would be really hard for them to get a lot of seats. So this is a bit unfair, but it could probably be much more unfair if people start to vote for smaller parties. So let's see Gallagher index. This is for Canada. There's a site here, and they complained about the election system in Canada. As you can see, they calculate the Gallagher index number for each year. This is for 2015. This is 12%, so that's super unfair. And as you can see here, they got 39% of the votes, but 54% of the seats. So there's a huge difference. You vote for one party, but you get another candidate. And actually they can fix the election system with some of these proposals. As you can see, the Gallagher index will really get down to a really, really small number if they just fix the election system. But they probably don't want to do that. This is Gallagher index 10% in 2008. So it's actually getting worse and worse. But the thing is, when you get the power as a party, then, I mean, these the left-leaning party today, they promise they will fix the system, of course, because they want to promise the voters that they will create a better democracy. But then if all these fixes, they make the system very fair, but they give them fewer seats per vote, then they of course don't want to change the system. And they don't want to change the system. And even if they lose, they still don't want to change the system, because maybe in 5 years' time they will win a lot of extra votes again. So they will just keep this two-party system, and they know either they will get the power or the other party will get the power. but these smaller parties will never get into power because the system is unfair, and it's unfair because it's first past the post. And this is what happens. First past the post is this: one candidate gets this many votes, then the second candidate get like 7,000% fewer votes, but there's only one president, right? So only one of these guys get elected, and all these votes get wasted because only one person got elected. And this, for in a presidential election, that's of course pretty unfair, and you wouldn't want to waste your vote on some smaller party if you can vote for the lesser of two evils. But as you can see, when you have first past the post in many different cities and regions, then you just have a lot of regions where the two biggest parties, they win a lot of seats, but the small parties, they need to win in that region to get even one seat. So it doesn't matter if they get like 20% of the votes in the country if they don't get seats, if they don't win regions and get these seats. And this is what happens, as you can see here. This is in the middle, you see how people voted, and outside you see how the seats are disputed or distributed. And then you can see the Scottish party, that's in yellow. They got a lot of seats because in Scotland they will get first past the post. For example, in their region or city, they will get a lot of people voting for the party, and the party will be the biggest there, so they will get one seat for that region. And this is what happens when you get the first past the vote system. This is what happens, because here, let's say you have a lot of Republicans, and usually a lot of Republicans, they will just vote for a Republican, and then they will get some candidates. But here you can change the system. So for example, here you have an area, and let's say they select 10 candidates. Well, you can split this area in specific areas, smaller areas, so you get most of the candidates for your party and not for the other party. Let's say these three areas, they have a lot of Republicans, but the Democrats, they make one big weird looking area where you have 100% Republicans. So they of course get one Republican seat, but in the two other areas you have 60% Democrats in each, and then 40% Republicans. So they will also get one seat each. They get 2 Democrat seats, and then Republicans get only 1 seat, even though the Republicans have a majority in this whole area. So actually you can win a whole state this way by just, getting most seats for your party. You can really make some different and weird areas this way, and really, I mean, basically, if you live in an area that's made so that your candidate wins no matter what, then you basically don't even need to vote, because your candidate will win automatically, but that's what they want to happen. They just want you to only vote for this candidate and not vote in any other area of the country. And this is what happens in Grenada. As you can see, one party, they got 58% of the votes, 100% of the seats, and the second biggest party got 40% of the votes, 0% of the seats, because they didn't get first past the post in any of the states. So I mean, if they don't get the most percentage of the votes in any state, then they get 0 candidates, even though they are pretty big party overall. And let's see how you calculate this Gallagher index. Well, you don't really need the parties, it's just to explain which party got what, but you don't need to use this. You need to input the seat numbers, then it will, this my chart that I made, it will calculate the percentage automatically for the seats. So it will look at the total and the seats, calculate the percentages, and then I inputted the votes too, and it will look at the total votes and then calculate the percentage of the votes. Then it will look at the difference between votes and seats. So if you have a lot extra percent seats than votes, that's super unfair. And the other way too, if you have a lot of votes but few seats, that's also unfair. So you see this in these numbers. Then you square the difference to get a plus value instead of negative values, and you combine all these values, then you have them, and then you take the square root of that number, and this is the Gallagher index. So you can see they got cheated, 5% cheated. So it's pretty much, but I mean, they know not to vote for the smaller parties, so they know how to use their vote effectively, even in a broken system. So let's see, if you, for example, take the German election 2017, then let's look at all this data we have here. This is all the election data that I have. And as you can see, this is how we have the percentages. We also have the seats and votes, but let's only look at the percentages. Be careful when you paste data because it often breaks. Okay, let's see. We could use the percentages directly in my table and it will calculate the numbers, no problem at all. But right now, what if we only have the seat numbers? Let's say we only have these numbers for the seats. We don't have the percentages for anything. Oh wait, then the seats. So we copy that. We go to the table that I made. We just input the seats numbers, paste, then calculate the percentages. Oops. And we take the votes. Oh, wait. I think this is the votes. We take the votes. We input the votes. And we delete these weird things. Okay, as you can see, I inputted the votes and calculated a percentage. I inputted the seats and calculated a percentage. And then it took the difference between these numbers. And you can see this party, they got too few seats. And this party got too many seats because it's a minus number. But then you square the difference to get plus values and not these minus values. Then that's the combined row column. Then you half it, and then you take the square root, and this is the Gallagher index number. So basically this German election, it was pretty fair. I mean, this is not a super low number, but it's under 5%, and so most voters will feel that, well, I voted for this party, and this party is as powerful as they got votes. Maybe they're a bit more powerful or a bit less powerful than they actually deserve to be. But it can be because the system is broken. For example, if you have a region where you have minorities and you give them extra votes because you feel bad for them. So for example, in Australia, you have some candidates that are getting into parliament just because they belong to a certain human race. It doesn't matter, it's not how many they are, it's just they get some seats because they belong to a certain race. And then of course, because they get extra seats, because they're this and that race and not white people, then, or not, I mean, Chinese or whatever, then, yeah, then the other parties will be cheated for some seats because they're not getting to them. So actually you can get a minority group can vote for a certain party, and that party could actually get a huge unfair advantage. And this is actually what you can see in these numbers. I mean, in Australia, you have these unfair systems built into the election system, and yeah, you get these high numbers. Yeah, so this is what happens when you have this first past the post. You can get, for example, Al Gore versus Bush in 2000. You get Bush winning Florida, so he gets all the seats from Florida. I think he got 100% of the seats from Florida, right? By winning Florida. Yeah, because he got first past the post in Florida. But he only got first past the post by like under 600 votes. And the third candidate, he of course had never a chance to get first past the post. But he took some votes from Al Gore because they have a similar political conviction. So actually, he got like 100,000 votes, and if he didn't run, then probably Al Gore would get, I mean, maybe 900,000 more votes than he did now, and of course will beat Bush by a huge margin and win Florida and win the presidency. And yeah, wasted votes if you don't vote, or you just, I mean, you can vote and then for a third party, but then you have no chance of getting a say in anything. So you better vote for the two big parties, and they will try to keep the voting system going as it is and keep the unfair balance, because then they will make sure that no new party gets into power. So even if the opposition wins, they still want this system to remain going, because they will still win an election somewhere in the future, because it's either the other party or your party. So people will just get frustrated with the other party at some point, because they can just do whatever they want, right? Because the election is unfair, the system is unfair. So they can just take advantage of the system and then lose the election and wait a few years and then take advantage of the system again. Yes, that's all. Basically, such a table, it's pretty cool, and you can rebuild it or copy my table or whatever and get this index for your election. Thank you.